Welcome back to the studio. Let's take a look at pricking irons. They're really useful in crafting and very popular, so we're going to talk about exactly what they are. We're going to look at the variations that you can look for when purchasing them, and then a few things to keep in mind when using them. So with that, let's dive right in. Pricking irons are metal tools with a grouping of equally spaced teeth, and they're used primarily to put marking holes or marking kind of indentations along a stitch line. And where these holes go will then be opened up further, and that's where the stitching will go through. And we'll talk more about those variations in a moment. Typically, there are multiple teeth on a pricking iron, and they come in variations of teeth distances. For example, this one is 3.85 millimeters. That's going to be the space between tooth to tooth. And that way, depending on the density of stitching that you would want on your item, you can choose an iron that's got the right spacing. On larger items, you may want a wider spacing, and on smaller items like a watch strap or something, you may want a narrower spacing, so your stitching looks tighter and a little more to scale with your item that you're making. And so, along with that, the irons come in different tooth counts. You can go usually from 1 all the way up to many. And the idea is that if you're working on an item that's small, you want to have a smaller set to make those holes. And if you're working on something that's larger, you're going to want to make quicker work of that. And so you want to have a tool that's got more teeth, so you have to use it less times. And the way that these are used are primarily by putting a block underneath to absorb and protect your tool. And then you basically just set it where you want it to go. And then here we're going to use our maul. We basically just tap the top of our tool to make those marks. And then take it out, and you can see we now have those marks in there. And you could certainly use this, if you don't have a groove in there already, you could use this instead of a groove, as long as you have some straight line to follow. And so the idea is that you continue this all the way down the line, and when you do that, you can kind of line that in there and then continue. And that's what will create those indentations. Now, usually, the pricking irons are used to make the marks. To make the actual holes through the leather, 2 things can happen. Actually, 3. 1, if you're using a very thin leather, then the pricking iron alone may be enough to go through it, but that's not always the case. If it's not, typically an awl is used to kind of push through those holes and also keep them relatively tight. So when the thread goes in there, it's not as wide as this mark. Additionally, we could use something called a stitching chisel, like this, that can then be intended to go through and make those holes open end to end. So whereas the pricking iron is more for marking, you can kind of see the size of those blades there. The stitching chisel, which is a different tool, is meant to go fully through the leather and leave those holes in there. And we could show you this in another segment. So here are the irons. They're intended for the marking. You can kind of see the size there. And here are the chisels next to it that are intended to make holes all the way through. You can see they're a little beefier. You can see even the ends are a little different, where these are a little more flat and these are a little more pointed because they're intended to go through. When looking for an iron, there's a couple things to keep in mind. 1, quality of manufacture matters a lot. These are just very basic ones to show you the variations in sizes. There are some that you can get that are essentially a nice brass handle or other kind of material, and it has replaceable teeth. And so if these break, you're able to switch out those teeth. There's also an option that to interchange with another set where the teeth are closer spaced together, or there's more space apart. So essentially you're paying for a more universal tool that can allow you to vary its configuration based on what you're trying to do. And so while these will do very basic jobs, if you're looking for really fine work and the ability to replace broken teeth, then there's also variations of this tool where you can, replace those teeth and change the configuration of it. So if you do find you're doing a lot of hand leather work and you want it to be relatively precise and easy, you may want to look into one of those that has the variable configuration to it. Otherwise, for very basic things and just starting out, something like this can work, just as well, given that it's primarily for marking holes. And so those are the main options there. You could even use, for hole marking, things like an awl. The benefit of the chisel is the multiple teeth, and you could basically just, start at one end and then, line up the last tooth in the last hole and then just work your way down. In short, that is the stitching chisel. If you have any questions, let us know. If you have any recommendations or other experiences with it, would love to hear about it. And there you have it. Until next time, keep crafting.